cops and other law enforcement people have read it, what were some cases you worked on that made you think, even if for a moment, that something supernatural or paranormal was going on? A police officer was working the desk 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. When a fire alarm signal went off many years ago, the police department offered alarm monitoring service. We still had 10 to 12 places that were hardwired, and it would require pulling apart a lot of equipment to disconnect the system, so we just kept it going. The first shift dispatch is already punched in, so she took it. I'm headed out the door to the fire department when 911 rings from the same address. I answer it. No one on the other end. I assumed they barely got to call before passing out. I bolt out the back door, hop in a squad car, radio in the 911 call on channel 3 that both police and fire can hear, and then I'm going directly to the house. I arrive just as another unit shows up. No signs of smoke, and no sign of anything. An older woman comes walking up the street pushing a wheelchair with an elderly lady, her mother. They live there and just went out for an early evening stroll before dinner. I tell them what we have going on. Nobody else lives there, and as far as the elderly lady can remember, the alarm was disconnected from the house years ago during some renovations. They don't have any alarm system either, just a couple of smoke and fire detectors. We do a walk around the house, get to the back door off the kitchen, and you can clearly see and smell gas. We turned off the gas at the main, set up some fans to air it out, and find a cracked gas line going to the oven. The daughter said she spilled some coffee she was making for their walk and had to move the oven a few inches to clean, which probably broke the line pushing the oven back in. Nothing else in the house is disturbed and both phones are on the hook. The fire chief shows up about 15 minutes into the call. He goes over to the two ladies and gives them both a hug. He's nearly in tears. The elderly lady in the wheelchair, her husband was the fire chief 60+ years ago for our department. The daughter, her husband passed away a few years ago. He was also a member of our department. I never believed in ghosts or spirits, but that call made me think maybe people who spend their lives doing good are allowed by some power to look over their loved ones every so often. A cop here. My partner and I were dispatched to a welfare check. The elderly guy? Nobody had seen him in a few days. His mail was overflowing in the mailbox. He missed a doctor's appointment and his car hasn't moved, etc. We both know we are about to find a body. We arrive on the scene and can't get anyone to the door. We look through the window and sure enough, we can see his foot on the floor in the living room. My partner is a corporal and pulls rank and makes me go first. The door is unlocked, and as soon as we open it, we smell a mostly fresh dead body. Almost relieved, we both enter and he tells me to check vitals on the dead dude. He is obviously dead with lividity, dried feces on him, and dried saliva around his mouth. So I go to stand over him and see if I can get a pulse, at which point he takes a deep breath, rolls over and asks why we are in his house. At this point we both start screaming, "Oh shit!" and "What the fucks?" as we both run out of the house. We called EMS and they transported him. They said they couldn't get a blood pressure or pulse on him. I think he died a week later in the hospital. I still get jokes about raising the dead. Now that is something that would make me shit myself and quit the job right there and then. This is a good supernatural or paranormal story rather than a creepy one. I'm a detective and spent some time as an expert on sex crimes and crimes against children. It was the best or worst assignment I've had. One case I had came in at midnight. A young woman with a toddler comes into one of the precincts to report her ex-boyfriend raped her during a custody argument. Long story short, it was legit, and one of the most violent and sadistic cases I've ever had, so I'll spare the gruesome details. I still have no idea how this woman made her own way to a precinct with a toddler. Part of the investigation requires me to talk to the toddler victim, said the toddler was present for everything. I'm a child forensic interviewer as well. During the interview, the toddler recalls their father becoming angry and hitting the mom. Then, the toddler said that the nice woman showed up and she couldn't see past the nice woman. The nice woman held her and told her that they were both going to be safe and sang her a song in a different language. The toddler said the nice woman went over to the front door and knocked on the door. Then, the nice woman helped them and their mom to the car before flying away. In the victim's interview, she said that her ex-boyfriend had a knife to her throat and put it to the skin to cut her throat open, but he got distracted for some reason then ran out of the apartment. She had no explanation why. The suspect was caught about 8 hours later. He confessed to absolutely everything. When I asked him about the knife to the throat, he said this, "I swear to God, I was going to cut the bitch's throat open. But I thought I heard a knock at the door and thought it was the police." Once I saw it was clear, I ran outside. He is now serving life in prison, and the mom and toddler are safe and doing well. I'd love to know more about the nice woman. Edit. Wow, this blew up. I'm going to answer a few of the questions here and then turn my phone off so I don't waste a rare day off talking about work. Yes, this is a real account of an interview I did. I feel comfortable sharing because I'm protecting the identity of the victim and the case has been adjudicated. It's technically public information, but a FOIA request could both confirm this account and take away anonymity for the victim. I'll leave the details where they are. I'd love to know more and would have loved to ask more questions, but a rule about child forensic interviewing is that the interviewer cannot introduce any information that the child hasn't introduced themselves. This is to reduce suggestibility. Open-ended questions did not reveal any further details. There is a rational explanation that children in crisis develop alternative narratives to cope with trauma. You can decide. Damn, that's the coolest sad thing I've ever read. Props to the nice woman. I am a CNA in a local hospital. One of my patients just had a quadruple bypass open heart surgery, and I went in to check her vitals. The room was dim and the hall was quiet. I'm looking at her, and in the corner of my eye, I see something drop from the ceiling out of nowhere. It makes a big clunk sound, and I turn to see what it could be. There's nothing there. At that moment, my patient looks up at me and says, "My dad's here," passes back out. I finish my job and leave. When I would go to that floor again as a floater, I would hate to go into that room. I'm a CMA, and I was working the night shift in an Alzheimer's unit. All of the residents were in and out with their lucidity. One lady seemed to be having hallucinations, which was pretty common for those residents. She insisted her husband was there, and she talked to him, scooted over so he could sit next to her, etc. Just generally acted like there was another person there when there wasn't. Her husband, Jim, had been dead for a couple of years. She seemed happy, and there's no point arguing with someone with dementia anyway, so we left them to visit. After a while, she quiets down and says Jim left. Across the hall, the lady in that room turns on her call light. Her complaint? "This man won't get out of my room." We don't see anything and ask, "What man? Who is it?" She turns to the nothingness beside her bed and says, "Who are you?" Then turns back to us and says, "His name is Jim." Jim's a feisty one. Wife can't kill you for cheating if you're already dead taps temple. When I was 19 to 21, I was employed as a security enforcement officer through a local private investigator firm. I know I wasn't technically law enforcement you're asking for, but I've always wanted some place to share this story. I spent a 12 p.m. to 12 a.m. shift at an upscale theater, and then my boss called me and told me I was assigned to a YMCA construction site that everyone kept calling out from. The sooner I could come in, the better, he said. So after working 12 hours at the theater, I spent another 3 p.m. to 8 a.m. at that site. By the time I arrived home, it was around 9:30, and I was so tired I could barely keep my eyes open. But I received a phone call. It was my brother. His birthday was that day, and I had completely forgotten about it. My whole family and I went shopping around and then ate at a restaurant about 45 minutes from my house. At around 1 p.m., I told them I had to leave because I just couldn't keep my eyes open. As I was driving home, no amount of music or driving with the windows down would keep my eyes open. I started drifting into the opposite lane of traffic. I decided it was best if I pulled over. I looked around and there was an ice cream shop. So I stopped in. It was a weird place for it to be because the highway I was driving on was a smaller country highway and it was on the outskirts of town. So an odd place to put a shop that would seem to rely on foot traffic. There was a woman out front asking if I had stopped for ice cream. I didn't want to be a dick and just tell her I wanted a nap, so I said yes. I went inside and it was rather junky. It looked like they bought furniture from old barbecue restaurants and threw it at random into the building. The same woman was now behind the counter. I said I wanted 2 scoops of chocolate on a cone and pulled out my bank's debit card. "We don't take cards here," she said. She handed me the ice cream cone. I dug around in my pockets and went back to my truck for change, but I found about 50 cents and I gave it to her. She said the price was $1.80, but that'll do. I didn't know what else to do because I was half asleep and she had given me the ice cream cone already despite the fact I was attempting to pay with a debit card as she was making it. I said thanks and walked outside to stand and eat it. I'm a pig when I eat, so by the time I made it to my truck, I had some already on my face and uniform. Before I could make it to my truck, the woman walked outside to talk to me. "You look troubled," she said. "But whatever you're going through, you'll be fine. I got in my truck and leave this I'm now assuming batshit crazy ice cream vendor. I got home and fall asleep. The next day, I'm getting my uniform ready when I see chocolate ice cream on my uniform shirt. The ice cream shop wasn't far away from my house, so I felt I should go pay her what I owed. I pulled up to the building, but it was locked. The building was empty, and there was a sheet of dust caked over the doors like no one has touched them in years. Edit. Fixing autocorrect mistakes. Writing this while on the phone in the bathroom was not the best way to write my story. Damn, that's cool. It's like an ice cream shop of good fortune and cheap-ass ice cream. Sounds like the business went under without you paying for your ice cream. Poor woman. My dad used to work as a corrections officer at a rural prison. He drove perimeter, which just means he made circles around the jail in a truck, checking empty buildings for runaway inmates and just generally being bored for 8 hours every night. One night, my dad is parked on a hill just reading a magazine when he starts to feel a thumping in his body. He described it as the feeling you get when speakers are playing a song with really heavy bass and you can feel the bass in your whole body. Anyway, he puts the magazine down and checks his rear view and he sees someone outside the truck. He grabs his pistol and jumps out of the truck, weapon drawn. When he gets outside, he sees a procession of Native Americans walking through the truck and directly through his seat, only to disappear at the exact spot he was sitting. He said it was clear they were ghosts because many of them appeared injured. This went on for a few seconds, and then the whole procession disappeared. He called the other perimeter guy on his walkie to try to explain, and the other guy almost immediately stopped communicating. Turns out the other guy had seen this happen before but didn't believe in ghosts, so he wouldn't talk about it. I was an EMT for a while. We got a call about someone who was riding their bike at a breakneck speed when they hit a car head first without a helmet. We went over immediately. Despite the fact that it was broad daylight and we were in the middle of suburbia on a Saturday, nobody even came to check on this poor guy. Seriously, the streets were empty. Usually, a massive crowd gathers around violent accidents like this. So his skull was pretty much smashed in and he was unresponsive. It was the worst head injury I'd ever seen. We assessed that he had a major skull fracture, a concussion, and he was bleeding profusely. He was also missing teeth and had a minor road rash, but fortunately he wasn't missing much skin. To give you an idea of how bad it was, this was the kind of injury that most people don't survive. If you did survive, you'd basically be a crippled vegetable. Normally, we would have moved him off the road, but when someone has a head or neck injury, that isn't very safe. My partner, who was also training me as I was still kinda new, went to check his pulse while I began to unload our gear. He crouched down, felt for a pulse for a while, and then stood up and opened his mouth to say something. Suddenly, the guy fucking jumped up. He didn't use his arms to pick himself up, he just fucking jumped to his feet. It startled the two of us. He looked at us, smiled, and attempted to grab his bike. We tried to stop him, but we didn't exactly want to wrestle him to the ground given his condition. He got away from us and bolts into the woods without his bike. My partner was in even more disbelief than I was. He just stared at where the man had run off, mouth agape. Then he turned to me and muttered, "He had no fucking pulse, man." I asked him if he was sure, and he swore up and down that the biker was clinically dead. We contacted the authorities for assistance, and they sent a search and rescue team into the forest. I don't know if he was found or not, because we normally don't get much information about patients after they go to the professionals. Keep in mind that this was the Pine Barrens, so they had a lot of ground to cover. My best guess is that he went to a loved one's house out of confusion. What I found odd about that is, head injuries bleed like fucking hell, so you'd think the guy would leave a long red trail of blood for the cops to follow. Edit. Grammar. I originally typed on mobile. Sorry. Edit 2. It seems I left out some details. I'm not an EMT anymore. I was only an EMT for about a year. I decided the medical field wasn't for me, and I switched out to pursue computer science. Don't get EMT and paramedic mixed up. We are only taught the basics of first aid, and then we just take a test. It's basically the lowest level job you can get in the medical field, so we can't legally pronounce someone dead. In fact, we almost always leave fatal accidents to the more qualified people. Had this person actually been dead, we wouldn't have done much. I didn't mean this was a fatal accident. The shock wasn't that he just sprung back to life, but rather that he was alive despite lacking a pulse. The guy was riding his bike very quickly through a suburban area when he struck a parked car. The car was a hatchback, parallel parked on the street. The house the car was parked outside of was presumably who called us in, but for whatever reason people seem to think that you can just call us and be done with it. It was a bit out of the ordinary that nobody seemed to notice that an accident happened, though. I have no idea what happened to the guy. Head injuries usually cause people to become violent or uncooperative, but you've got to be very careful with them because moving their head or neck around too much can cause damage to the spine. When he got up, it really took us by surprise, and it didn't help that he moved pretty damn quickly. As he attempted to grab his bike, my partner attempted to grab his arm. He pretty quickly slipped away and ran. We immediately contacted authorities and told them. They arrived, we told them what we knew, and then they sent a small team to find him. I imagine they did find him, because he clearly was never reported missing. If he had, I imagine the news would have jumped on it. The first responders are never really given information about a patient after they do their job, so I can't say for sure what happened to him after he ran. I can say with complete confidence that he had no pulse when we found him, but somehow he was still alive. Edit 3. My inbox is fucked. I really didn't think this was that interesting. Thanks for the karma. Thank you so much for watching. Now, let me know in the comments. Have you ever had a paranormal or unexplained experience in your own life? I always look forward to reading your stories. Don't forget to check out our other videos. We have plenty more interesting and creepy stories for you. Take care. I'll see you tomorrow.